Denver Sports presents the Mile High Hockey Podcast with Mike Evans, presented by Fort Comfort Gutters. Now here's your host with the latest on the Burgundy and Blue, Mike Evans.
Hey everybody, welcome in on what is an exciting day to talk about everything going on with the Avalanche. Now I'll be completely honest, I was a little bit worried about this because we do this podcast on a Friday, and with this being the trade deadline day, I was worried that everything would happen on trade deadline day and we'd be in a position where we really wouldn't be able to react to all the things that the Avalanche would do until next week. But a very unusual trade deadline around the NHL. Typically, you get that flurry of moves on trade deadline day. But in this case, it was a few days out where we started to see moves. There were a lot of them, and the Avalanche, of course, were right in the middle of it. What does that tell you? Well, it tells you that there are plenty of teams out there that believe that they have a shot this year and that each conference is wide open. And so there are plenty of teams that are looking at their situations and saying, why not us? Let's go out, let's add. And it has really led to an entertaining arms buildup, arms race across the NHL, across the Western Conference, and the Avalanche right in the middle of it. As we'll get into the specifics of the moves and the individual players and look at how they fit, but just overall what the Avalanche did, I was really encouraged to see it. You know, from watching this podcast throughout the season, I have been banging the drum for really two different things, two different boxes that needed to be checked. One was addressing the second line center. I never, ever bought into the idea of Ryan Johansson being the solution. And that was quickly borne out. And we saw where that went. But also just the idea that the Avs supporting cast, which they've been trying to get back to that level that they were at in 2022 when they won the Cup, they were not able to do it last year. They acknowledged that by discarding most of their supporting cast. And then this year, acknowledging as the season went along that it wasn't going to be good enough with some of the additions that they made, and then going full scale here at the trade deadline. So the fact that they recognized the need to go out and make improvements is encouraging, makes me feel good, and makes me feel good about the direction that they went. As far as the moves, hey, look, we don't know for sure how these moves are going to work out. But on paper, they look good. They look real good. I've always thought, I always did the giant eye roll whenever after an NFL draft, immediately draft grades are given out. Like, how can you give out draft grades to somebody who hasn't played in the NFL yet? This isn't the same thing because we're talking about guys with NHL resumes, but still there's an element of, okay, on paper it looks good. Now let's see how it plays out. Something to keep in mind here as we watch this new look Avalanche team and see how it takes shape. Nathan MacKinnon at the NHL All-Star game, All-Star break, was doing a press conference with national media, and he was talking about the upcoming trade deadline. And he said, one thing that bothers me is that the trade deadline's so late in the season. In McKinnon's words, that the trade deadline comes along at a point where there's only about 18, 19, 20 games left in the regular season, that in his opinion, it doesn't necessarily leave a lot of time to work in and welcome and integrate those new players that you're adding. Not impossible, but it's not ideal. In his opinion, move the trade deadline up so that when you make those deals, when you bring in these Casey Middlestats and you bring in these Sean Walkers and the like, you're giving them perhaps 25, 30 games to get acclimated instead of what they're dealing with right now. But be that as it may, there is still time for the Avalanche to get all these guys on the same page, and it's going to be fun to watch. Let's kind of look into the different moves. First of all, what I loved about what they did was, and we first started talking about this on this podcast when they were reportedly in on Brandon Tanev, the defenseman who ended up going to Dallas. And it was kind of like what does that mean, right? Because we were never really, in all the speculation that was going on when we were talking about the possibility of acquiring a second-line center, we weren't always looking at the possibility of those moves, like one move precipitates another move type thing. And so when you look at the Sean Walker deal and you see them being able to not only get what effectively was a replacement for Bo Byram, but also being able to unload Ryan Johansson and unload that contract to the point where you're gaining some cap space that allowed them to go out and make some of these other moves we'll talk about. That was a really, really shrewd move. And so then it became, well, now you're looking at trying to go out and get a impact second-line center like Casey Middlestat and being able to just do it one up for Bo Byram. Because when we were on this podcast, I know when we were talking about the idea of going out and acquiring a center, how much would you be willing to give up? And it was always from the standpoint of, okay, would you give a first-round pick? Would you give a prospect? Would you get a top prospect? Would you give up Bo Byram? And it was always kind of with the idea that at one point I felt like, well, if you're going after a Casey Middlestat, excuse me, sorry, turn my phone down. Do I want to, looking for alerts if there's another Avalanche trade, do I want to give up all that for a Casey Middlestat? I wasn't really that keen on it, the asking price being that. But once you start to see these other moves, and once you see you've now found your Bo Byram replacement, you've been able to shed Johansson, you've been able to shed his salary, and now you're looking at a situation where it's just Byram for Middlestat. Now it's a deal you're looking at as like, okay, all right. And I go back to, like, people ask me, what'd you think about the moves? I said, they're good moves, but they're necessary moves. And I want to throw that in there. These were necessary moves that had to be done if we wanted to take the Avalanche serious as a Stanley Cup contender. Because prior to all these moves, while I would never discount the Avalanche because of just simply how great their core is, I wouldn't be able to go into the playoffs really feeling super confident about their Stanley Cup chances. They'd be in the mix, of course, but they could as easily be a second-round knockout as they could be a team that gets hot and goes to the Stanley Cup Finals. But with these deals on paper, now that they've been done, now that they were necessarily done, now you can look at them a little different way. And nothing's guaranteed. When they acquired Casey Middlestat, and I saw a lot of people react to it like they have their 2C solution now for years. Well, that's a little bit presumptuous, is it not? Think about some of the other centers that have rolled through here since Nazem Kadri. Wasn't Alex Newhook supposed to be a solution? Wasn't JT Compher supposed to be a solution? Wasn't, to a certain lesser extent, Ryan Johansson supposed to be a solution? So I'm not ready to just say, hey, no doubt, lock it down. It's done. It's settled. Casey Middlestat is their answer at 2C. You just can't do it until he starts proving it. But, certainly if you're looking at the qualifications and somebody who fits the profile of what you need for the Avalanche for a second-line center. See, that's the thing. We were talking about this along the way in figuring out who would make for a good second-line center, next man up type thing. It was always with the idea that, remember, what is a second-line center for the Avs is probably a first-line center, 1C, for most other teams, and that was the case in Buffalo with Middlestat. So if you're looking at his qualifications, of course, they're there. Young, as Jared Bednar described him and Chris McFarland described Middlestat, not necessarily a burner, good skater, but he's not a burner, but he is soft hands, evoking images of Bob Hartley talking about Milan Hajduk and his magical hands. Soft hands, really good playmaker, really good distributor. Probably somebody, as his career goes along, surrounded by better talent, should score even more. But if you're looking for the profile of what you were hoping the Avalanche would get in a second-line center, Middlestat fits the profile. So now it's just a matter of going out and proving it and playing up to what that profile would indicate. So from that standpoint, shrewd move, good move. On paper, good move. You put him out there. Val Nichushkin coming back. And let's face it, Val feels like an acquisition, right? Val feels like a trade deadline acquisition because it's been so long since he went into the player assistance program. When you look at some of the to-dos, right, for the Avalanche over the remainder of this regular season. A couple things that jump out. One, just get everybody acclimated to what McKinnon was talking about. You got a lot of new faces, a lot of new combinations. Bring everybody in. Let's get them rolled out there. Let's get them playing. Let's form that continuity. Let's get them to gel, find that chemistry. That's got to be to-do list on the to-do list, number one. Secondly, get Val back to the level he was at pre-going into the player assistance program. That's crucial because you get Val playing at the level he was when he left. That was a player who was playing at a top 15 in the NHL level. I don't think that's a stretch. That's not hyperbole. Get him back to playing to that level. So get the lines, get the chemistry, get it gelled, get Val back, and you can feel really good about where this team is going. And the other moves, and some smaller moves, but no less impactful, is the acquisitions of guys like Yakov Trenin, Brandon Duhaime. What I like about what the Avalanche have now set up with their four lines is that these are all veterans. These are all guys with NHL resumes. Trenin's got 268 regular season games under his belt. Duhaime's got like 170 regular season games under his belt. So these are guys that step right in, and they're NHL players. And these are guys on your fourth line. And so you look up and down their four lines. You look at their third line. You look at their fourth line. These are all NHL players. You know, you're not trying to acclimate a young player. You're not calling up some plug-and-play type player from the Colorado Eagles. These guys are vets. These guys fill roles. And so there is a depth right now to the Avalanche on paper. It's probably going to annoy some of you because you just want to run with the idea that, hey, they're loaded, they're stacked. Let's go plan a cup parade. I'm not ready to go there yet, but boy, it certainly looks good on paper. Let's see what they do. But they have put together their lines in a way. And by the way, we don't even have Logan O'Connor in the mix right now. And that's the other thing to keep in mind. The Avalanche have created enough forward depth that you're going to have guys who are going to be hungry. I'm not even talking about ice time. Hungry just to get a jersey, to be part of the roster for a playoff game, for a playoff series. There's going to be a lot of competition going on behind the scenes. And there's going to be a lot of competition, pressure on guys to hold on to their spots in the lineup. That's awesome, right? Your competition's always good. Competition always brings out the best. And if you have guys who are hungry to be part of this playoff run, they're going to be pushing the guys who are already there. Creates a good situation. So that's what we're looking at right now with the Avs as they get ready to go to work. The defensive pairings, those are solid. Getting rid of Bo Byram, tough, but necessary. I think you'd all agree with me that Bo sort of, I don't know if regressed is the right word, but he kind of plateaued this year, right? Didn't take a jump and has sort of played himself off that untouchable prospect label that, let's face it, if we had been having trade talk, rumor conversations way back at the beginning of the year, and if we started talking about the idea of trading Bo Byram, probably a lot of you would have revolted and said, no, you can't do that. He's a huge part of their future. And I'd have agreed with you. But the way the season is played out, he kind of lost some of that untouchable aura, didn't he? And once you were able to replace him with a guy like Sean Walker, who's a really good player, good skater, really fits in with what the Avalanche like to do with their defensemen, very mobile. I thought it was really revealing in talking about the acquisitions. You got a little bit of a glimpse into how the Avalanche view themselves, right? What is their profile? What is their style? What are they looking for in their players? And certainly with their defensemen, they're not looking for the hulking, massive, real defensive defenseman back there. They want their defensemen to be able to skate. They want a little scoot in their defensemen and be able to jump in, be part of the play, move the puck out of their own zone. They look for really exceptionally good skating defenseman, and Walker fits that profile, which certainly made losing Bo a little bit more tolerable. I thought it was also interesting. Bednar was talking about Middlestat, and he said, what I like about Middlestat is he's got the kind of game where he can hold on to the puck, he can dangle, he can move, he can possess, and he can make plays. He's not a dump and chase type guy. And that's, again, you talk about the evolution of the NHL, where it was always traditionally dump and chase. Get the puck in behind the other team's D, go to work, get into the corners, work along the boards, win battles, and go about trying to score that way. Whereas now, more of an emphasis placed on skill, playmaking, and looking for guys that don't have to just dump the puck in and go. They can skate it in on their own. They can create for themselves, for others. They're able to hold on to the puck. They're able to see the ice. They're able to read the ice, make plays, make good decisions. And it seems like Middlestat fits that ideal of what the Avalanche are looking for. So exciting times. I think my biggest takeaway from everything that the Avs did, good moves, necessary moves. On paper, they have shored up a lot of holes and weaknesses, and now it's just a matter of, hey, go out, play. Show us that this is the right mix. Show us that this is the right kind of mix of your core and your complementary players that we haven't seen since 2022. I guess, by the way, one other quick thought. Still a lot of speculation, hope, I guess, about Gabe Landeskog being able to come back. Put me still in the skeptical category, hopeful, but still highly skeptical. My friend Adrian Dater came out this week and reported that he's hearing that Landeskog is at about 75%, which still seems like that's quite a bit to make up to feel comfortable about being able to throw him in right before game one or for game one of the playoffs. But we'll see. Chris McFarland saying there's still a lot of runway, I guess, to cover for a potential Gabe comeback. The good news is that the moves that were made certainly takes all the pressure off. There's no real sense of, man, they really got to get Gabe back because they're thin here or they're thin there. There's no sense of that right now. Maybe by the time we get to the playoffs, some of these additions haven't popped yet. Maybe you do feel like, oh boy, they could really use Gabe, and maybe you look at his comeback a little differently. The good news is that Gabe can continue his comeback, can continue his rehab, can continue his conditioning, ramping things up with the idea that if you can come back, great. But there doesn't seem to be as much pressure as maybe we were feeling about the possibility or the need of a Gabe Landeskog return maybe earlier this week. So we wish him well. We hope it happens, but safe in the knowledge that if it doesn't, Avs look to be in pretty good shape here moving forward. So we'll see how it all plays out. We're doing this on a Friday. They'll be playing Minnesota later tonight. First chance to see the new look Avs out there. Fascinated, curious, interested, excited. Really, really curious to see how it all looks out there on the ice starting tonight. And, of course, we'll be back next week to really start to ramp up our hockey talk as we get ready for the stretch run with the playoffs looming really only about a month from now. So can't wait. Exciting times ahead for sure. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please, always would love your responses, your commentary. Hit me up on Twitter, X, at Mike Evans 1043. Hit me up during the Schlereth and Evans show on the RamosLaw.com text line, 303-713-1043. Want to thank everybody for listening. Thank you to my man Matt over there. Great job engineering and putting this whole thing together. Couldn't do it without you. Have a great weekend, everybody, and we'll see you again next week on the Mile High Hockey Podcast.